All right, so I figured this is what content creation is all about, right? Find a beautiful spot, great scenery, and talk about the fights that's coming up this weekend, while also talking about how the UFC has monopolized the name of MMA. For example, you ever been at a gym where a bunch of casuals would ask you such casual questions such as, do you train UFC? And yeah, why do you think that is? It's because the UFC has its foothold in that name, and as a result, they are perceived to be the best company in the world. A promotion who, by the way, does not do any co-promoting with any other company in terms of sharing their talent and putting them up against each other. In particular, the fight with Francis Ngannou and John Jones, which a lot of people were waiting to happen before Francis Ngannou had left. But nonetheless, here we are. The argument still remains that the UFC is top of everything that deals with MMA, because people don't even know, at least in a casual space, don't even know what MMA really is, but they know what UFC is. They know that it's a fight that is held within the cage. Well, speaking of fights that are held in the cage, how about Anthony Hernandez fighting this weekend against Michel Pereira? I believe it's Ferreira. It's pronounced a little bit different from Alex Ferreira, but nonetheless, way different than Alex Pereira in the way that he fights. Obviously, the way that Alex Pereira fights, very orthodox, very standard and basic in the way that he throws strikes, yet devastating. Whereas with Alex Ferreira, his whole entire style is predicated on being flashy and sometimes really just using up way too much energy than he should, and would become very detrimental to his game planning as the fight goes on. In comes Anthony Hernandez. Now, what could I tell you about Anthony Hernandez? Probably a whole lot. Number one, I fought in the same card as Anthony Hernandez back in Reno Combat Fighting Championships in July 2012. I had an opponent, I believe his name was Hugo Valdez. And, well, the fight went to a no contest because obviously he hit me with an illegal kick, very similar to the Aljo and the Peter Yan situation. But nonetheless, yeah. Anthony Hernandez fought in that card as well. He fought a 185 championship fight, as a matter of fact, and I happen to have gotten into it with his opponent that same night. So his opponent came at me because I was wearing a Palestinian scarf, and then he was saying something to the effect of, well, dude, it's not that serious. Nobody's gonna unalive. Obviously, that's not the exact words that he said, because unalive is more of a modern context. But yeah, that's a little side story with Anthony Hernandez. So yeah, I fought in the same card as him versus Hugo Valdez. It was a great fight. We had a great brawl, had a fast-paced type of moving type of fight. I tried to take him down a few times. He caught me with a guillotine. I was able to escape, and the fight went on. He kneed me a few good times. I got back up. I almost rocked and finished him. And then next thing you know, I shoot for a takedown, hits me with a head kick while I was down on the ground. And so, yeah, it just went out to no contest after the fact. But Anthony Hernandez won his fight that night by decision, which leads me to explaining how Anthony Hernandez fights. Now, he's been in a lot of fights like that. He knows how to fight in a way where he can score and win, but also knows how to finish. You've seen that in the Ferreira fight. Ferreira is obviously a very talented grappler, long-time jiu-jitsu practitioner, champion, ADCC veteran in those types of high-level competitions in jiu-jitsu. And he managed to finish him. But he can also fight a very smart and technical striking match with you. So overall, Anthony Hernandez is a very well-rounded fighter. Obviously trains with the likes of Max Griffin, trains out here in Sacramento, and the MMA Gold's gym that he trains at. I believe he's trained a few times with Team Alpha Male as well. So he's got a lot of good coaching, a lot of great staff, and as a result, he also has a great vast amounts of experience, right? Dating back to 2012, as I mentioned, being in the same card as him. So here we are, taking on someone like Alex Pereira. What did I mention earlier? There's going to be a lot of sporadic movement on his part, and as a result of these sporadic movements, he's going to try and catch Anthony Hernandez at some point, right? But Anthony Hernandez is going to have a very disciplined game plan. He's going to catch Michel when, let's say, he's going to, let's say, go for a cartwheel kick. Anthony Hernandez is easily going to take him down. He's going to have long ground control time. And as a result, I think the grappling prowess of Anthony Hernandez is going to outmatch the striking attempts and the elusive attempts of Pereira, and we'll either get a 5-round decision or a late stoppage with a submission due to the strikes similar to the Vieira fight. So that's my official prediction on that. So now, moving on to the next topic at hand, which is why the UFC is monopolizing the game. Well, obviously, it is all about leverage and power, right? You look at the pay structure that they have going on. That is how they're able to maintain a brand, because they can pay for a lot of the lighting, a lot of the production, and also maintain it in a way that allows their company to be kept afloat. In other words, they're not in a going out of business style like the way boxing is. And by the way, speaking of boxing, shout outs to Hatman Strikes Back, because he's actually the guy that sort of inspired me to make this title or add this particular topic in the mix, as we're also sort of doing a play-by-play breakdown of the fight between Alex Hernandez and Michel Pereira. So the UFC, yes, by the way, shout out to Hatman Strikes Back on that one for raising this topic, because it is very important to try and understand. So what you got to understand out of the UFC is they are the #1 company in the world right now. Is there a PFL? Yes. Now, why am I bringing this up? Obviously, the other fight that's going on this weekend is Francis Ngannou and Renan Ferreira. Other than that, it's also Pacheco taking on the all-time great in the women's divisions, whether that would be 135 or 145, at least in this particular matter, Cyborg. 2 great fights, okay? Which, by the way, has more of a linear aspect to it, because let's think about this. Pacheco beat Kayla Harrison, who is set to become the women's face of the UFC right now. Okay, that's what they brought her in for, and Pacheco beat her. Francis Ngannou is the lineal champion of the world, regardless of how we looked at the Anthony Joshua fight. So they have the merit this weekend to say that, you know what, we at least have the best heavyweight or the best women's 145, because they made her cut Kayla Harrison into 135 in the UFC, right? So that is an argument point that they have. It doesn't mean that they have the moral high ground in the superiority of the promotion. And this is why the UFC will never co-promote with such company, because if they do, it's going to hinder their moral high ground when it comes to promotional superiority. So it's not so much about competitive superiority, although for a long time it was like that. However, what it means right now is this. It absolutely means that In 5 years' time, the landscape of MMA could change in terms of, let's say they'll have the best 185ers in ONE FC, and then the third place will be in the UFC, and then the second place is Bellator or PFL. And they're sort of one company right now, but they're also operating in a separate matter. So it's really interesting to see where they're going to go with that and how they're going to compete with the UFC. But obviously there are other brands out there, such as Octagon, other brands such as Brave FC, which, by the way, a company where Muhammad Mokaev is going to be going to, and perhaps may be getting paid even more, which I believe he was already part of that company. But nonetheless, they're creating more opportunities in MMA. But in a way, it was always like that. Look at Paul Daly. When Paul Daly got kicked out of the UFC for late punching Josh Koscheck after taunting him from wrestling him from pillar to post round 1 to round 3, he had decided, you know what, I'm going to sucker punch him. And just like that, he got let go during a very sensitive time in the UFC. But guess what? It created more options for him. Paul Daly started fighting in Bama. He started fighting in Bellator. He started fighting in Japan. He even did a few kickboxing fights. So there was a wide range of freedom that he made, and probably made even more money as a result of it. So that's what you have going on in the world of mixed martial arts and the UFC's monopoly, but not so fast and not so long. But we will wait and see. Until then, don't forget to like and subscribe, and also enjoy the scenery in front of you.